Thank you, Mr. Ajayi.
Let's bow our heads in prayer.
Okay, use this one.
I hope you can all hear me. Okay, let's bow our heads in prayer. Our Father and our Lord, we thank you because of a time like this for bringing us together again for another AGM of our great company, Mixta Nigeria. We thank you for all of the heads present here and for the operations during a COVID year. Not one of us is missing. We thank you for that. We ask that you look into our proceedings today, guide us through whatever we do today, and at the end of it all, we will thank you. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Ajayi. Article 17 of the Articles of Association of the companies provides that quorum at all general meetings shall be formed by the presence of members or their proxies who hold 25% of the issued ordinary share capital of the company at the start and throughout the duration of such meeting. I hereby call on the representative of the registrars, Mr. Frank Ofuegbu, to give a report of the proxies received and to confirm that we have a quorum for today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
We received a total of 126 proxies with a total of 449 units of shares, representing 97.09% of the issued share capital of the company. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. From the information received from the registrars, a proper quorum has been formed at this meeting, and the meeting is duly constituted. I will have the secretary to read the notice of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Notice is hereby given that the 13th Annual General Meeting of Mixta Real Estate PLC will be held at the Corporate Lodge, Lakwe Lakes Golf and Country Estate, Ibeju Lekki, Lagos State, Nigeria, on Friday, the 17th of September 2021 at 11 a.m. prompt to transact the following business. Ordinary business, to receive the audited financial statements for the year ended 31st December 2020 and the report of the directors and auditors thereon, to re-elect directors, to authorize the directors to appoint auditors for the financial year ending December 31st, 2021, and to fix the remuneration of the auditors, to elect members of the audit committee, to disclose the remuneration of the managers of the company. Special business, to ratify the appointment of Ms. Monica Musonda as the director of the company, effective 4th of January 2021, to ratify the appointment of Ms. Sula Proxenos as the director of the company, effective on 1st of April 2021, to ratify the appointment of Mr. Ugochukwu Indubuisi as the director of the company, effective 28th July 2021, to consider and, if thought fit, pass the special resolutions as listed on the notice of the meeting in this annual report. By order of the board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, the Company Secretary. Having read the notice on behalf of the management and directors of the company, I welcome all members of the company, their proxies, the representative of our registrar who is attending, I think is here, and members of the audit committee and others attending this meeting. I wish to draw the attention of members of the company to the registrar of shareholders, which is available for inspection. The register of the shareholders. Okay. I also wish to inform the shareholders that the register of directors shareholding is available for inspection during the meeting in compliance with Section 301, subsection 8 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020. I would now like to introduce the directors, officers, and advisors of the company, who I will ask to stand up in recognition when I call their names. The members of the board of directors that are physically present, as you know, because of the COVID issues, we have some of our directors that are attending this meeting virtually. We'll come back to them as we go along. Those of us that are here physically, Mr. Dejiali, Mr. Sadiq Mohammed, Mr. Benson Ajayi, Mr. Ugochukwu Ndubuisi, the members of the board of directors who are attending the meeting virtually. We have Ms. Monica Musunda. Monica, you can wave. Ms. Sula Proxinos. You can see them on the screen there. I'm here physically. My name is Dapo Oshinusi. The company secretary represented today by Mrs. Ada Aye. The auditors of the company, Deloitte and Touche, are present at today's meeting, and they are represented by Mr. David Achugamunu, Mr. Ayotunde Aminu. Is that here? Oh, okay. Thank you. The Securities and Exchange Commission is represented by Mr. Abu Ibrahim. We also have shareholders representative on the audit committee for the financial year that ended December 31, 2020. Present at today's meeting are Mrs. Nike Ogulana. That's the chairman of the audit committee. We also have Mr. Ralph Osayame, Mr. Esson Ogunleye. I would now like to direct you to pages 12 to 15 of the annual report, where we have the chairman's statement. And with the permission of the shareholders, I want to believe that that has been read. Thank you. We now move to the ordinary business of the day. I hereby present the audited financial statement of the director's report of the company for the year ended 31st of December 2020, which had previously been circulated to all shareholders in accordance with the Companies and Allied Matters Act and the company's article of association. I would like to suggest that they have been taken as read, that all the shareholders have a copy, either physically or digitally. I now lay before you the audited financial statement of the director's report of the company for the year ended in the form that is sent to all the directors. The auditor's report. I now invite the representative of the auditors, Deloitte and Touche, to read the report of the auditors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our report runs from pages 44 to 48 of the annual report. Because of the length of our report, may I seek the permission of distinguished shareholders and board members to read the very first, second, and last paragraph of our report. Independent Auditor's Report to the shareholders of Mr. Real Estate PLC. Report on the audit of the consolidated and separate financial statements. Opinion. We have audited the consolidated and separate financial statements of Mr. Real Estate PLC, the company, and its subsidiaries, together the group, set out on pages 21 to 100, which comprise the consolidated and separate statement of financial position as at 31 December 2020, the consolidated and separate statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, the consolidated and separate statement of changes in equity, and the consolidated and separate statement of cash flows for the year then ended, the notes to the financial statements, including a summary of significant accounting policies. In our opinion, the financial statements give a true and fair view of consolidated and separate financial position of Mr. Real Estate PLC as at 31 December 2020, and its financial performance and cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with the International Financial Reporting Standards, the requirements of the Companies and Allied Matters Act, the Investment and Securities Act Cap S124, LF in 2007, and Financial Reporting Council Act 2011. Basis for opinion. We conducted our audit in accordance with international standards on auditing, ISOs. Our responsibilities under those standards are further described in the auditor's responsibilities for the audit of the consolidated and separate financial statements section of our report. We are independent of the group and company in accordance with the requirements of the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants, ISBA, International Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants, including International Independent Standards, ISBA Code, and other independence requirements applicable to performing audits of financial statements in Nigeria. We have fulfilled our other ethical responsibilities in accordance with the ISBA Code and other ethical requirements that are relevant to our audit of financial statements in Nigeria. We believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. Last paragraph. Reports on other legal and regulatory requirements. In accordance with the 5th schedule of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, we expressly state that, 1, we have obtained all the information and explanation which, to the best of our knowledge and belief, were necessary for the purpose of our audit. 2, the group has kept proper books of account so far as appears from our examination of those books. 3, the group and company's financial position and its statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income agree with the books of account and returns. Signed, David Achugamonu for Deloitte and Touche, Chartered Accountants, Lagos, Nigeria, 28 June 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deloitte and Touche. Thank you. I now invite Mrs. Nike Ogulana, the chairperson of the Statutory Audit Committee, to read the Audit Committee report.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, distinguished board members and distinguished shareholders, ladies and gentlemen. Audit Committee report. To the members of Mixta Real Estate PLC, in accordance with the provisions of Section 404 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, the members of the Audit Committee of Mixta Real Estate PLC hereby report on the financial statements for the year ended 31st December 2020 as follows. We have exercised our statutory functions under Section 404 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020 and acknowledge the cooperation of management and staff in the conduct of these responsibilities. We are of the opinion that the accounting and reporting policies of the company and group are in accordance with legal requirements and agreed ethical practices, and that the scope and planning of both the external and internal audits for the period ended 31st December 2020 were satisfactory and reinforce the group's internal control systems. We have deliberated on the findings of the external auditors, who have confirmed that necessary cooperation was received from management in the course of their statutory audit, and we are satisfied with management's responses to the external auditor's recommendations on accounting and internal control. Signed by myself, Mrs. Adenike Ogunlano, Chairperson, Audit Committee, on behalf of the other members of the committee, Mrs. Olanike Anani, Mr. Sadiq Mohammed, Mr. Ralph Osayeme, and Mr. Esson Ogunleye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman of the Audit Committee. Thank you. We now move to the question and answer session. I hereby request members to ask questions or to comment on the reports and the accounts. And in this regard, appropriate reference should be made to the relevant pages to ensure that the right answers are provided. Kindly state your name and the company that you represent, when you have questions. I want to state at this moment that we have some questions that have been sent online. I'm going to read the questions, and I will ask either the CEO, Mr. Deji Ali, or the CFO, Mr. Benson Ajayi, to provide answers to the relevant questions. So the question from Barrister Ganiat Shinybola says that with reference to page 96, note 16 of the annual report, relative to previous year, professional fees went up from 575.5 million to 1.4 billion naira. What is responsible for this steep change? I will read all the questions so that they can be taken at the same time. The next question was that travel and accommodation cost went up from 62.9 million to 73.5 million during the lockdown. Why? Directors, we're taking the notes, right? Directors' expenses went up from 3.8 million to 28 million. Why? Other operating expenses went up from 207.7 million to 608.8 million. Why? Then the second question says, while noting the efforts to bring the company back to a profitable region, please confirm when shareholders will be able to earn a profit. Those are the two questions. The first one has 4 subsections, and the second one is about profitability. So I will, I don't know who's going to.
Yes. There's a common answer to there's a common answer to most of the questions, so I'll just invite Mr. Benson.
Okay. Okay, so Benson, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for the questions that you asked. I think Mr. Ali mentioned that there's a common answer to most of the questions, and the common answer was that in the previous year, we were looking at our operations that were based solely in Nigeria. So it was Mixta Nigeria and all the Nigerian subsidiaries that we were looking at their numbers in the previous year. But in the current year, that's 2020, we're looking at operations in 4 other countries plus all of the Nigeria operations. So whereas we had more revenue, much more revenue than we had in the previous year, we also had to consolidate the cost of the other subsidiaries into the operations in Nigeria. That was one of that was the key reason why we had the general increase in cost across the board. But if you look at it, it's on an aggregate level, it was a marginal increase. But in terms of the expense heads that have been identified, speaking directly to them, apart from this consolidation efforts that this consolidation issue that we spoke about, there were also additional efforts in terms of professional fees, also to do certain things within the company, notably to preserve our assets, and that involved us taking on additional professional fees. Travel and accommodation costs were marginally increased in spite of COVID because, like I said, there were additional 4 countries that we consolidated. Directors' expenses, we had more directors on the board, and we also had we had that increased expenses. In terms of other operating expenses, is majorly because of increases that we saw across the board last year in terms of inflation, in terms of the additional subsidiaries that were added. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jai, for those answers. There's still a question about profitability. When do you want to begin to give shareholders profit?
When will we be declaring
There's a second part to the question.
I would just refer us to page 50.
It's working?
Page 50.
You need to put it on. There's a knob. I think it's working.
Page 50 of the annual report. I think one of the noticeable things that the 2020 report shows is the return to profitability. Despite that, we are unable to propose a dividend because the focus for that exercise is the company's results, which still has retained earnings in the negative. So our objective is to wipe that and therefore put us in good stead to be able to recommend dividend to shareholders. The expectation is that in the next financial year or two, the entire deficit would have been wiped off, and therefore we'll be able to resume payment of dividend to shareholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope those answers your question. Is there any other question? Anybody else? Okay, thank you, CFOs. Thank you, CEO. In accordance with provision of Section 249, subsection 3 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020 and Article 23, subsection B of the Articles of Association of the Company, I declare that save the voting of members into the Statutory Audit Committee, which will be done by a show of hands, voting at today's meeting shall be by poll. The poll voting shall be conducted by the registrars of the company, and the auditors, Deloitte and Touche, shall act as scrutineers. To facilitate a smooth conduct of the business of the day, I will move each motion and invite seconders for each of these motions from the members, from the shareholders. You are kindly requested to clearly state your name to enable the company secretary to take appropriate notes. That's fine. The next item we're going to take is the re-election of directors. This is the next item on the agenda, and given that my directorship is to be presented for re-election, I would like to invite Mr. Deji Ali to moderate this agenda item. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next business of the day is the re-election of directors. In accordance with Section 285 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, Mr. Oladapo Oshinusi and Mr. Benson Ajayi, being the longest-serving directors, have retired by rotation and have put themselves up for re-election. By virtue of Section 287 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, a motion for the appointment of 2 or more persons as directors by a single resolution shall not be made unless it has first been agreed by the meeting unanimously. Therefore, I move a motion for the re-election of Mr. Oladapo Oshinosi and Mr. Benson Ajayi by a single resolution. May I please ask for a seconder support of that motion? Thank you. Mr. Ralph Osayame.
My name is Ralph Uluole Osayame. I rise to second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Those in favor of the motion, could you please indicate by show of hands? I think we need to register. Yeah. Those against the motion, could you please indicate by show of hands? I declare that the motion to re-elect Mr. Oladapo Oshinosi and Mr. Benson Ajayi by a single vote has been carried. Having obtained the unanimous resolution of members that Mr. Oladapo Oshinosi and Mr. Benson Ajayi be re-elected as directors by a single resolution, I hereby move the resolution for the re-election of Mr. Oladapo Oshinosi and Mr. Benson Ajayi as directors of the company. May I please ask for a seconder for that motion? Yes, sir.
My name is Esan Ogunleye. I hereby second the motion.
Thank you, sir. May I then ask the registrars to read the results of the poll?
On the resolution to re-elect Mr. Oladapo Oshinosi and Mr. Benson Ajayi, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of ordinary shares, representing 100% of the vote cast, voted in favor of this resolution. There was no vote against. There was no abstention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Following the results of the poll as announced by the registrar, I hereby declare that the motion has been duly carried. Congratulations. May I therefore hand over to you as chairman? Thank you.
Thank you, shareholders, for putting us back to serve on your behalf for the company. The next item will be the appointment and the remuneration of the auditors. The next business of the day is to authorize the directors to appoint the auditors for the financial year ending December 31st, 2021, and to fix the remuneration of the auditors. Therefore, I move that the directors be and are hereby authorized to appoint auditors for the financial year ending December 31, 2021, and to fix the remuneration of the auditors. I would like to have a seconder, please. Someone to second? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Sadiq.
My name is Sadiq Mohammed, representing ARM Holding Company. I second the motion.
Can we have the poll, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the poll to authorize the directors to fix the auditors' remuneration, or to appoint the auditors for the financial year ending 31st December 2021. The poll is as follows: 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast, voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against, and there was no abstention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, registrars. Following the result of the poll as announced by the registrar, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. The next business of the day is the election of shareholders of the company to the Audit Committee for the financial year ending December 31, 2021. Section 404, subsection 3 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020 mandates that a public company shall establish an audit committee and that the committee shall consist of 3 representatives of the shareholders and 2 non-executive directors nominated by the board of directors. The auditors, in addition to their reports to the shareholders, are required to submit a report to this committee. With respect to the representatives of the shareholders on the audit committee, the company secretary has received nominations for the following members to represent the shareholders' interest on the audit committee. They are Mrs. Nike Ogunlana, Mr. Eson Ogunleye, and Mr. Ralph Oluwole Osayeme. Thank you very much. Thank you. In view of the fact that only 3 nominations has been received, the 3 nominees have been nominated to be the shareholders' representative on the audit committee for the financial year ending December 31, 2021. Further to this, I shall move that these 3 members be elected shareholders' representative on the audit committee. I hereby move that Mrs. Nike Ogunlana be elected as shareholders' representative on the audit committee for the year ending December 31, 2021. May I have a seconder, please? Thank you very much. I hope the secretary is capturing that. I want to call for those in favor of the motion to indicate by show of hands. Okay, thank you. I want to call for those against to indicate by show of hands. Thank you. Following the results of the show of hands, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. I move that Mr. Ralph Oluwole Osayeme be elected as shareholders' representative on the audit committee for the year ending December 31, 2021. I'd like to have a seconder, please. Someone to second? Yes, please. Okay, thank you, Mr. Ajayi. Those in favor, show of hands. Those against, show of hands. Again, following the results of the votes by show of hands, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. I hereby move that Mr. Eson Ogunleye be elected as shareholders' representative on the audit committee for the year ending December 31, 2021. May I have a seconder, please? Yes, please. Thank you very much, Godwin. Those in favor, show of hands, please. Thank you. Those against, show of hands. Following the results of the votes by show of hands, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. Consequently, the shareholders' representative of the audit committee for the financial year ending December 31, 2021 are Mrs. Nike Ogunlana, Mr. Ralph Osayeme, excuse me, Mr. Eson Ogunleye. The next business of the day is the disclosure of the remuneration of managers of the company. In accordance with Section 257 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, which mandates the disclosure of managers' remuneration to members of a company at the annual general meeting, I hereby draw the attention of shareholders to page 95 of the annual report, where the remuneration of the managers of the company is duly disclosed. Our next item on the agenda is the ratification of the appointment of Ms. Monica Musonda as director of the company effective January 4, 2021. I hereby move that the appointment of Ms. Monica Musonda as director of the company effective January 4, 2021 be and is hereby ratified. May I have a seconder, please? Seconder? Someone, shareholder, please second. Oh, yes.
I second the motion. I'm Sadiq Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. I will need the registrar to give us a vote count on this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To ratify the appointment of Ms. Monica Musonda as a director of the company, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of this resolution. There was no abstention and none against. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Registrar. The next item on the agenda is the ratification of the appointment of Ms. Sula Proximus as director of the company effective April 4, 2021. I move that the appointment of Ms. Sula Proximus as director of the company effective April 4, 2021 be and is hereby ratified. I'd like to call for a seconder, please. Mr. Osayaman. Thank you very much. We'd like to have the registrar to give us a poll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To ratify the appointment of Ms. Suala Prozenos as a director of this company, we received a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast. They voted in favor of this resolution. There was no vote against and none abstained. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Registrar. Following the result of the poll as announced by the Registrar, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. The next item on the agenda is the ratification of the appointment of Mr. Ugochukwu Ndubuisi as director of the company, effective July the 28th of 2021. I move that the appointment of Mr. Ugochukwu Ndubuisi as director of the company, effective July 28, 2021, be and is hereby ratified. May I have a seconder, please? Mrs. Ogulana. Thank you very much, Mrs. Ogulana. May I have the poll, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To ratify the appointment of Mr. Ugochukwu Ndubuisi as a director of this company, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of this resolution. There was no vote against and no abstention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Registrar. Following the result of the poll as announced by the Registrar, I declare that the motion has been duly ratified. We now move to the approval of the company's proposed delisting. I'd like to ask Mr. Ali to give us a few minutes background into the process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there are two related issues to provide some clarification and for shareholders. The first has to do with the request to delist the shares of the company from the NASD platform. In the past, in the absence of a listing on the main stock exchange, the platform available to shareholders to generate liquidity for their shares has been the NASD platform. But it does come with its own limitations, and with the intention of the company to now list its shares on the main stock exchange, there will no longer be a requirement for that because we have greater efficiency available to us on the main platform of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Consequently, in order to ensure there is no conflict between the trading practices or trading activities on the two platforms, it's been proposed that a delisting of the shares of the company on the NASD platform be effected. Mr. Chairman, in relation to that, and in response to the request that has been made by shareholders previously, is the need for administrative reasons to rationalize the number of shares that we have without affecting the value of investments of shareholders. And that comes via reducing or consolidating the shares into fewer holdings, essentially dividing it by 100, but it doesn't affect the value of the investment of shareholders. So that also will be a resolution that goes along with the proposed listing of the shares of the company on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali. Subject to obtaining the approval of the relevant regulatory authorities, the Board of Directors of the company be and are hereby authorized to delist all or a portion of the shares of the company from NASD OTC Securities Exchange, subject to obtaining any relevant regulatory approval. The board be and is hereby authorized to enter into and execute all agreements, deeds, consent letters, undertakings, and any other documents necessary to give effect to the above resolution. The board be and is hereby authorized to appoint such professional advisors and undertake such other acts as may be necessary to give effect to the above resolutions. May I have a seconder, please? Seconder, shareholders? Yes, Mr. Gulaya.
My name is Esau Gulaya. I hereby second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gulaya. We'll need a poll and the registers to give us results of the poll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the resolution on authorizing the board to delist all portions of the shares of the company from NSD OTC Securities and Exchange, we received a total of 9,541,941,449 votes, representing 100% of the vote cast. All voted in favor of this resolution. There was no vote against and no abstention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On authorizing the board to enter into and execute all agreements, deeds, consent letters, undertakings, and any other document necessary to give effect to the above resolution, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast, also voted in favor of this resolution, and there was no abstention, none against. On the resolution, the board to appoint such professional advisors to undertake such other acts as may be necessary to give effect to the above resolution. A total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast, voted in favor of this resolution. There was no vote against, no abstention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Registrar. Following the results of the poll as announced by the Registrar, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. We'll move to the next item. We shall now proceed to the next item on the agenda, which involves the approval of the company listing by introduction. That the board be and is hereby authorized to procure the listing by introduction of all or a portion of the shares of the company on the main board of the Nigerian Exchange and or any other listing segments or boards of the Nigerian Stock Exchange or any other internationally recognized stock exchange that the board may deem fit, subject to obtaining the approval of the relevant regulatory authorities. That the board be and is hereby authorized to enter into and execute all agreements, deeds, consent letters, undertakings, and any other documents necessary to give the effect of the above resolution. That the board be and is hereby authorized to appoint such professional advisors and undertake such other acts as may be necessary to give effect to the above resolutions. I'm going to request a seconder, please. Thank you. Your name, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Godwin. We'll have a poll, please, and get the results from the registrar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To authorize the board to procure the listing by introduction on the main board of the Nigerian Exchange and or any other listing segments of the boards of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against. To authorize the board to enter into and execute all agreements, deeds, consent letters, undertakings, and any other documents necessary to give effect to the above resolution, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and no abstention. To authorize the board to appoint such professional advisors and undertake such other acts as may be necessary to give effect to the above resolution, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast also voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and no abstention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Registrar. Following the result of the poll as announced by the Registrar, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. We'll move to the next item, which is the conversion of the shares to convertible notes. We shall now proceed to the next item on the agenda, which involves the approval of the companies for the conversion of the convertible notes issued to ARM. I hereby move that the conversion into fully paid ordinary shares of the company of the convertible note in the principal amount of 33,837,304 euros and 86 cents, the principal amount held by the Asset and Resource Management Holding Company, be and is hereby approved subject to obtaining the approval of all of the relevant regulatory authorities. That the board be and is hereby specifically authorized to allot shares to ARM in such a number and at such price as shall be determined by the board of directors in accordance with the terms of the convertible notes purchase agreement dated December 18, 2019, between the company and ARM, and any other amendments thereto, provided that the aggregate of the nominal amount of the ordinary shares to be allotted to ARM shall not exceed the principal amount. The amount of shares shall be in furtherance of the conversion of the convertible notes only, and that this authority shall be valid from the date hereof to the date of the next annual general meeting of the company, unless renewed, varied, or revoked by a resolution of the shareholders of the company prior to that date. That the board be and is hereby authorized to extend and amend the terms of the agreement on such terms and conditions as may be agreed between the company and ARM, subject to obtaining all relevant regulatory approvals. That the shareholders hereby waive all preemptive rights and relating to the shares to be allotted to ARM in furtherance of this agreement. That the board and or the company secretary be and hereby authorized to take all such lawful and necessary steps and do all other things which are necessary to give the above resolutions. That any two directors of the company or any director and the company secretary be and hereby authorized to execute the relevant documents and or agreements to be entered into by the company in connection with the above resolutions. And that all acts carried out by the board and the management of the company, hitherto in connection with the above, be and are hereby ratified. I'd like to have a seconder, please. Yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Mayowa. We will require the registrar to give us the results of the poll, please.
The resolution on conversion of the convertible notes held by ARM into fully paid ordinary shares, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and no abstention. On authorizing the board to allot shares to ARM in accordance with the terms and convertible note purchase agreement with ARM, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and there was no abstention. On approving that the aggregates of the nominal amounts of the ordinary shares be allotted to ARM shall not exceed the principal amount. The result, 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast, voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and none abstained. On approving that the allotment of shares shall be in furtherance of the conversion of the convertible notes only, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast also voted in favor of this resolution. There was no vote against and there was no abstention. On approving, the authority granted to the board shall be valid from the date thereof to the date of the next annual general meeting of the company, unless renewed, varied, or revoked by resolution of the shareholders of the company. A total of 9,541,941,000 1,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution, none against, no abstention. On authorizing the board to extend and amend the terms of the agreement on such terms and conditions as may be agreed between the company and ARM, subject to obtaining all relevant regulatory approvals. A total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the votes cast, voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and there was no abstention. On the resolution, on approving that the shareholders hereby waive all preemptive rights relating to the shares of the to be allotted to ARM in furtherance of the agreement. A total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast, voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and there was no abstention. On authorizing the board and or the company secretary to take all such lawful and necessary steps and to do all the things which are necessary to give effect to the above resolutions. A total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast, voted in favor of this resolution, no vote against and no abstention. Also on the resolution on authorizing any two directors of the company or a director and a company secretary to execute relevant documents and or agreements to be entered into by the company in connection with the above resolutions. There were 9,541,941,449 votes, representing 100% of the vote cast, voting in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and there was no abstention. On ratifying all acts carried out by the board and the management of the company hitherto in connection with the above resolutions, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast, voted in favor of this resolution. There was no vote against and there was no abstention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Registrar. Following the result of the poll, as announced by the Registrar, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. We shall now proceed to the next item on the agenda, which involves the consolidation of the company's authorized share capital. I hereby move from the chair that the 8,726,514,000 naira divided into 17,136,962,414 ordinary shares of 50 kobo each and 316,065,586 convertible preference shares of 50 kobo each in the authorized share capital of the company be consolidated into 171,369,624 ordinary shares of 50 naira each, 3,160,656 convertible preference shares of 50 naira each, respectively, on the basis of one new ordinary share for every 100 ordinary shares and one new convertible preference share for every 100 convertible preference shares currently held, and each new consolidated ordinary share shall have the same rights and restrictions as the existing ordinary shares in the capital of the company, and each new consolidated convertible preference share shall have the same rights and restrictions as the existing convertible preference shares in the capital of the company. That the number of new consolidated ordinary shares and the new consolidated convertible preference share which each shareholder shall be entitled to based on their holdings shall be rounded down to the nearest whole consolidated share, and any fraction of the consolidated shares will be disregarded. That the existing share certificates issued to the shareholders of the shares which are held in physical form be treated as cancelled, and that fresh share certificates be issued for fully paid consolidated shares to such members in lieu thereof. That the members who hold their existing shares in dematerialized form, their respective beneficiary accounts be credited with consolidated fully paid shares in lieu of their existing shares. That the board of directors and the company secretary be and are hereby authorized to take such steps and actions as may be required to give effect to the above resolution. I would like to have a seconder, please. Yes, please. Thank you very much. I hope she's not the only one paying attention. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, on the resolution to consolidation of the company's share capital in the way and manner and such terms as set out in the notice of this meeting, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and there was no abstention. On the approval of the rounding down of shareholders' new consolidated shareholdings to the nearest whole number, or the nearest whole consolidated shares, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% votes cast voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and none abstained. On the cancellation of existing share certificates and the issuance of fresh share certificates for the fully paid consolidated shares to each member in lieu thereof, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and none abstained. On the resolution on crediting the respective beneficiary accounts of members who hold their existing shares in dematerialized form with consolidated fully paid shares in lieu of their existing shares, a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution, no votes against and no abstention. On authorizing the board of directors and the company secretary to take such steps and actions as may be required to give effect to the above resolution, 9,541,941,449 units of shares representing 100% of the vote cast voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and none abstained. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Registrar. Following the results of the poll as announced by the Registrar, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consequential amendment of the company's Memorandum of Association. I hereby move from the Chair that having passed the resolution in Agenda Item 12, I hereby move that the Memorandum of Association of the company be and is hereby amended by deleting Clause F of the Memorandum and substituting it with the following new clause. The authorized share capital of the company is 8,726,514,000 naira, divided into 171,369,624 ordinary shares of 50 naira each and 3,160,656 convertible preference shares of 50 naira each in the capital of the company. The company may increase its share capital by the issue of new shares of such amount as it thinks expedient. The shares in the original or in any increased capital may be divided into several classes, and there may be authorized thereto respectively preferential, deferred, or other special rights, privileges, conditions, or restrictions. I'd like to move for a second, please. Yes, please. Thank you very much. Registrar, ready?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this resolution on the amendment of the company's memorandum and article of association, we received a total of 9,541,941,449 units of shares, representing 100% of the vote cast voting in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and there was no abstention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Registrar. Following the results of the poll as announced by the Registrar, I declare that the motion has been duly carried. Thank you. This now concludes the business of this day. I want to thank all of you for finding time to attend this meeting, in spite of all the issues of travel and COVID restriction. I hereby declare that the meeting is now closed. Thank you very much. I want to enjoin everybody that you continue to observe the necessary precautions to keep safe. The COVID thing is still out there. Please try and continue to be safe. To end the meeting today, I'll just have to ask someone to give us a closing prayer. You have a volunteer? Mr. Son, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Son. We'll now take the national anthem to close out this meeting. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a safe trip.